The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're coming to you through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. We can also be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring Stay the Course. The sun rises and sets as the earth spins. The seasons come and go as she wobbles on her axis. No 2 days or seasons are exactly the same, yet they have cycled without fail for millennia, ever enduring. There's nothing new under the sun, yet everything renews itself. As long as humans remained in sync with the cycles and the way life works, they renewed also. Alas, somewhere along the line, many humans decided they had a better idea. Why just take your share in its season when you can have it all? In our greed and narcissism, we left a circle of life and created our own reality of steel, concrete, electronics, planes, trains, and automobiles. Our Earth Mother struggles under the strain of artificial lifestyle, as do all living upon her and below her surface. From air pollution to fracking, EMFs to miles of plastics in the ocean, the damage from our short-sightedness is glaringly obvious. It's becoming clear that unless we return to some balance, our days are numbered. This has gone on for generations. Many of us are clueless what balance is. It's appalling how many of our children grow up never having harvested a garden, building a simple campfire, sleeping in the ground, or hiking in nature. Some are clueless which direction the sun comes up, but they can all text like champs and play Pokemon Go to nauseam. In a little more than 200 years, modern humans have managed to trash the environment. Yet many of our indigenous peoples around the world managed to live in balance with the earth, doing no harm and leaving very little trace for over 10,000 years. Overrun and persecuted by their more modern brothers and sisters, they nonetheless stayed the course and preserved the very lifestyle and information that may very well save us in our hour of greatest need. I'm not suggesting we all throw in the towel and revert to a native lifestyle. There are way too many of us, and it's way too late for that. Unless something gleans our herd, so to speak, we'll have to find a third option. However, nature renews itself. There are checks and balances in place to restore balance. If we don't take proper action soon, well, some of that herd gleaning will probably be the natural result. I've spent over 40 years steeped in the shamanic way. I had the good fortune to train under numerous native elders from various traditions. Each, in their own way, taught me the workings of life and my place within it. A little over 3 years ago, I went on a shamanic journey. My question: how to improve my practice and what I have to offer my clients and students. I was instructed by my spirit guides to go live what I teach and then teach what I live. In the process of following their guidance, I ended up selling everything I had, including my home of 13 years, and moving to the remote Colorado mountains. Pooling resources, I purchased land and designed and built a small passive solar house. It's off-grid with solar panels and batteries for power. Though I'm surrounded by pinyons and other conifers, not one tree had to be cut to make room for the house. Every step of the building process, from deciding where to drill the well to the placement of the design of the house, I shamanically consulted with the land and did as instructed. This is the way I was taught. We only need to ask the earth, the land, and we can be guided back to the circle of life. We can't go back to purely indigenous ways, yet, through combining Western science with traditional indigenous knowledge and wisdom, we can create a new way to live in balance with all of our relations. Our guest this hour, ILARION MERCULIEFF, author of Wisdom Keeper, One Man's Journey to Honor the Untold History of the Unangan People. Had a traditional upbringing in Western education, earning a BA from the University of Washington. He has served as the chair of the Indigenous Knowledge Sessions of the Global Summit of Indigenous People on Climate Change, co-founder of the Indigenous Peoples Council for Marine Mammals, the Alaska Forum for the Environment, and International Bering Sea Forum, and the Alaska Oceans Network. He's currently the president of the Global Center for Indigenous Leadership and Lifeways. After this commercial break, I'll introduce Larry, and together we'll discuss the modern-day application of ancient indigenous practices and how we can combine them with science for the betterment of our world. This could very well be life-changing, so don't go away. You are listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is ILARION MERCULIEFF, author of Wisdom Keeper. Larry, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Great to be here, and hello to your listening audience.
Thank you. I understand you were close by here in Boulder this July on a panel with Obama's chief advisor on climate change. How'd that go?
Well, it went okay. You never know what effect your presentations are going to have, but that's out of my control anyway.
How long did you present for?
Oh, let's see, probably about 20 minutes or so.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. What was your subject?
The subject was climate change, or what Westerners call climate change, that Indigenous people call climate crisis. And we were exploring our different views.
I'll bet there were some too, huh?
That's for sure.
So how'd you end up getting so involved in climate change or climate crisis and environmental issues?
Well, I've been closely connected to all of creation since I was a child, and taking care of Mother Earth is of paramount importance. And the elders that I work with all over the world were speaking with an urgency that I had not heard them speak in tone and tenor about what's happening now, and they are issuing their call to action.
You know, I've been noticing this too. A lot of my teachers and their tribes and are trying to get a hold of me and say, "Hey, we got to be heard. We have to get this out there. People need to know what's really going on." Would you tell us a little bit about your native heritage and upbringing?
Yes, I'm Unangan. That's the correct pronunciation, by the way.
Sorry about that.
And Unangan people have been out in the Bering Sea off of the coast of Alaska for over 10,000 years, and we're still there. And that's remarkable. And I had a very traditional upbringing. My generation was probably the last generation that had a fully traditional upbringing, where, for example, to get to know my grandfather and for my grandfather to get to know me, I had to be with him 24/7 for 2 years, starting at age 4. And then at age 5, I had an acho, which is a traditional mentor, and he taught me much of what I know about being a man, about being in relationship to ourselves and to others and to all creation, the ethics and values of being Unangan, and about sharing, reciprocity, tuning into the group, all these different things. And he took me under his wing from age 5 to age 13, but yet in that entire time, he may have said no more than 200 words to me. And the reason for that is that words are considered superfluous or may even be dangerous. That the most important things in human experience should be experienced, not talked about. And as soon as we talk about something, we define it. And to define a human experience, the most important human experiences, we diminish its meaning. And so my job was to watch, listen, and learn. I was never given instructions or explanations for anything. I just had to figure it out for myself. And in that way, I mean, the adult's responsibility was to create the space for a child to learn. And it's up to us as children to learn whatever we may. And unlike today, where we're given instructions, we learn by rote, and we're taught things that adults think we ought to know. My upbringing was totally opposite of that, and also the whole village raised me. And I've never been scolded, and I was always affirmed every single day of my upbringing by every adult in the village. So they would say something like, good boy. And I was always treated that way. And then I could go into anybody's home and be treated like the long-lost son, you know. Come in, sit down, eat. That's the way I was greeted all the time. And also I spent equal time with all the generations in my village. So the elders would take me out camping with them, where I'd listen to their stories, and I would listen for hours. And then the women would teach me the women's ways, and the men would take me out hunting and fishing with them. And I had to spend time with my peers to have fun. I mean, that's the way I grew up. And to never be scolded is something that I find very rare these days.
Oh, it's exceedingly rare, and I think scolding and controlling through guilt and shame is just so damaging in our society. With that kind of a beautiful upbringing, Larry, what prompted you to go to college rather than follow the more traditional path?
Well, because the adults in the village always encouraged me to get the Western education so that what I learned would be of use to my people. And we were always taught as individuals to think of the group first, and not for ourselves. And so I decided to do that, I had to go to the university, and before that, I had gone to Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding schools in high school, and and then the final thing was we had to meet with our counselors about our future education, and this counselor, well-intended, said, well, maybe you should go to the smallest college campus so that you can have a better chance of succeeding. And my early-born rebel in me said, okay, for that reason I would choose the biggest university on the West Coast. And and I chose the University of Washington, which at that time had 34,000 students.
Good heavens. Do you think you have a different worldview than most as a result of your very diverse upbringing combined with your education?
That's for sure. It's very different. I mean, when I first went to the university, I was put in with the so-called creme de la creme, the cream of the crop. They were very children or young people that were in very rich families, and I obviously didn't come from a very rich, monetarily rich background, and they would always communicate quick-wittedly. And the Unangan way is not to quip like that, and we don't act very quickly. We talk slowly, and so I couldn't relate to them being quick-witted, and so de facto I was kind of excluded from communications and relationships with the young people there. And then, so I took all kinds of classes up until my junior year. I would take world religions, philosophy, zoology, statistics, everything that I could possibly think of to explore what I might be interested in, and I couldn't find anything. In fact, I took a zoology class and I flunked it. That was the only class that I flunked. Yeah, because I couldn't see how taking one nerve out of a frog, dissecting the frog, related to how the frog is.
Yeah, he kind of loses his frogginess when you do that, right?
Yeah, and science kind of takes large things and takes a piece of it, so that they would study that piece in hopes that it would let them understand the whole. And where I come from, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and the parts act synergistically. They interact synergistically. And that's the difference between traditional ways of knowing and Western science. And I noted you said lifestyle in your introduction or your piece there in the beginning. It's not a lifestyle that we live. It's a way of life. And there's a difference. A lifestyle is something that you select and you want to do, like being near the beach, for example, where when we're born, we're ingrained with this cultural worldview, and it threads throughout our entire lives.
Wow. That's amazing. And, as you were speaking, it looks like we're just exactly inside out and backwards, the indigenous way from the Western way. And I've observed that more than once, in that the indigenous way is unity consciousness and care for the group rather than the individual. And our Western consciousness is all one-on-one, one-for-one, and to heck with everybody else, it seems like at this point. And it's failing, don't you think?
Yeah, the Yupik elders here in Alaska, they call this the reverse society or the inside out society because we reverse all the laws for living. And, where they say we used to have the heart tell the mind what to do, now the mind tells the heart what to do. And in our worldview, and in most indigenous people's worldview, the heart is the source of all intelligence, not the mind.
Exactly. Exactly. We're going to have to take a break, but I would love to pick up with the inside out society and coming from the heart rather than the mind on the other side of this break. Larry and I will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Previous broadcasts of thought-provoking episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Like I said, we're on www.xzbn.net. We will be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is ILARION MERCULIEFF, author of Wisdom Keeper. Larry, before we went into the break, we were talking about upside-down living and how we're living from the mind now instead of the heart. Can you explain that a little? And tell me, what effect do you think that's having on the world around us?
Okay, well, I'm not sure I understood the last question. So, anyway, the inside-out society or the reverse society, where we reversed all the laws for living, in the eyes of most indigenous peoples, is the reason why we are so off-kilter and off-balance in our world today, and it explains why we have the things going on that we do of violence, of pollution, of contamination, of suicide, of addictive behaviors. All these things are explained and encapsulated in this worldview, where, for example, we used to honor the wisdom of the elders, and now we are seeking youth, and we seek after being young. We used to contemplate the mystery of death, and now we contemplate the mystery of life. When you think about science, we're taking studies in creation to try to understand that creation. And when our people would contemplate what the mystery of life is, we used to, the elders would say, nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that, it's so true. Even our physical surroundings, for example, the all the manifestations of the imbalanced masculine, as we call it, where we've created things on the outside that are imbalanced because it's centered on the mind instead of the heart. And we create things like, I'm going to talk before an audience, and I'm a talking head. And the audience is supposed to, give their authority to me, their personal authority, because I'm an expert, right? And we've been ingrained in that way since the get-go, from the time we're infants until we die. We're told that we should always listen to and take the instructions of the authority. And so we learn the giving away our authority by first being raised as a child. We're told what to learn, how to learn it, and all these different kind of things. We're disciplined if we don't do it, and then to postdoctorate degree where all these things are a linear concept, and anything that's lower in that line is inferior in some way. Technologically, we have things in a line, and anything that's earlier in that line is inferior. Or it ends its usefulness and should be thrown away. And we can go on and on about how externally we've created these things. The desk, for example. Desk is a symbol of power and authority. And so the person behind the desk is the one that you're supposed to be subservient to. And it just goes on and on. Kindergarten through postdoctorate, it's a line of progression of supposed intelligence, which is concentrated in the brain and the mind. And, I think it was Einstein that said something like, you can't solve the problems by the same consciousness that created the problems.
Exactly.
And this consciousness is mind-centered, and Indigenous peoples know that heart is the true source of intelligence.
It's amazing how when we start to come from the heart and then, use the heart and the mind together, we get so much deeper understanding into any situation, don't you think?
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, you look at today's state-of-the-art so-called thinking, let's say in technology, where we talk about hybrid fuels, for example. And the U.S. is very much into hybrid fuels. And we don't think about what effect this has on Mother Earth. And so when the U.S. decides to concentrate on hybrid fuels, farmers all over the world are taking agriculturally productive lands and converting them to hybrid fuel crops like corn. And that is causing cost of food to increase and for more people to be without. Take the hybrid cars. No one thinks about what we do with these batteries that use exotic minerals when we're through with it. Is it going to be like what we do with our computers when we turn them in for recycling, supposedly, and they're taken and dumped off in places like Thailand or whatever like that, and the people take apart these parts of the computer and poisoning themselves and the land that they're on. We don't think outside of the box. And we are unable to, and we will not think outside the box until we go to the heart.
Yeah, exactly, because if we don't have heart for things, we cannot empath with them. If we can't empath with them, we really can't understand them. And I don't care if we're talking about animals or rocks or plants, everything has soul, everything has a place where we can connect with the heart, but not so much with the mind. Do you think that this is part of what we're dealing with here, is we've just disconnected to that degree?
Absolutely. That's what most of the elders feel around the world, that we have disconnected from our hearts. And as a result of that, for example, take Vietnam vets. When they came back by the tens of thousands, taken to addictive behaviors, to isolation, to watching TV for 17 hours a day, and taking drugs and alcohol, and the scientists or the doctors knew that there was something happening here, but it was invisible until they put a name to it, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome or post-traumatic stress disorder. And once they did that, they had something that they could grasp. And I don't believe that there's anyone in the world that has not suffered some kind of trauma to the soul or to the spirit. That you can look at the U.S., for example. You've got the World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. I mean, and Mexican-American War, the Civil War, where 600,000 Americans were killed and millions more wounded. And then you got things like the Inquisition that was in Europe, which killed 20 million women and severely injured millions more. And the Crusades. I mean, you just go on and on. There's no part of the world that hasn't had that. And those people who survived were survivors that disconnected from the heart because they didn't want to remember the traumas that they experienced in these wars.
Exactly.
And they became survivors, and they took on these behaviors that are passed on from generation to generation until it's here with us today.
Exactly. Larry, is shamanism practiced by your people, I take it?
What is?
Shamanism?
No.
Do you have medicine people?
Well, there are medicine people in Alaska, but amongst my people, we were the most damaged of the people in Alaska, the indigenous people of Alaska, where the Russians came and the Russian fur traders, and they caused an 80% loss of our population in 50 years. And then the U.S. government took over, and we suffered even more. My people, for example, we on St. Paul Island and St. George Island, which is our sister village, we were a captive labor force for the United States government until 1966.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you're talking to someone who was born into and lived the lifeless slave.
Oh, man. And of course, when someone goes in to conquer a nation, the first thing they do is get rid of their holy people and their wise ones so they can control the masses. So it's no wonder.
That's what the Russians did. They killed off all the shamans and their apprentices as their first act.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I believe Siberian shamanism is still outlawed there. It was at least 10 years ago. It's amazing. Just amazing.
Yep, it truly is.
And yet the key to healing this disconnect from the heart is found in spiritual healing through shamanic work. So, my goodness.
Well, it's found through a process of, my women teachers would taught me, go where the fear is.
Exactly.
And dance with the crone. And that's the first step that I need to do, is to go through my greatest fears and actually go through it, and by an act of self-love, you transform this energy to something that is positive. But that's one of the first steps that I took.
And that's a powerful, powerful step. And we aren't taught to do that. We're taught to avoid our fear, aren't we?
Well, that's right. That's another one of the reversals where we no longer have the courage to look at our darkest sides. And the reason for that is, well, many, but one of the reasons is that we are living this world of duality and polarity.
We're going to have to take a break. On the other side of the break, I want to talk about courage and environmental crisis. Larry and I will be back on the flip side of this commercial break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous transformative broadcasts on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our very special guest this hour is ILARION MERCULIEFF. He's the author of Wisdom Keeper. Larry, I promised our listeners when we came back that we were going to talk about courage and environmental crisis. So I think we're going to have a lot of courage to deal with the environment crisis. Would you mind talking to the environmental crisis that we're in and what you think we can do about it?
Yes, when we talk about these things, the elders would say, look at yourself and concentrate your healing on yourself. We cannot offer the world that which we do not have, and so when you think about it, we have created all these imbalances in the world, including the climate crisis that we're in now. And we've done it because we're concentrated in the head and not the heart. And they say that nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. And so when we criticize others on the outside, we're criticizing ourselves. When we trash the environment on the outside, we're trashing on the inside. When we judge others on the outside, we're judging ourselves first. And that we need to realize and act on it. Now, they also say that what are you choosing to focus on? Are you choosing to focus on that which you're trying to move away from, or that which you're trying to move towards? Because what you choose to focus on becomes the reality. And in other words, for example, there are more environmental groups in the world, or organizations in the world today, addressing the needs of Mother Earth, but yet Mother Earth's life support systems are going to the edge. Why is that? And the reason why, from the indigenous viewpoint, is that we are putting our spiritual, psychic, emotional energies into reacting to situations. They say we should address these emergency problems, but we must not be in a reactionary mode, and that we must instead focus that energy on what we want to create, not what we're trying to move away from. Because when we're concentrating on that which we're trying to move away from, we are adding to the energy to the energy that is creating that imbalance.
Boy, no truer words were ever spoken. How do the practices of your people help them maintain balance between themselves and nature, and how do you see that as helping us now?
Well, our people, Unangan people, have a legacy of a very spiritual culture, including spiritual technology. We have, for example, we had a basic form of brain surgery. We knew everything in the body and had words for it. We even had a word for billion, and there is only one other culture in the world that had a word for billion pre-science and industry, and that was Egyptians. And we were a very evolved culture in North America, and we still have the basic spiritual messages that we incorporate into our daily lives, and that's really symbolized by what we call the volute, V-O-L-U-T-E, which are the wings on the caps or the hats that the hunters wear when they go out hunting. And in that, it encapsulates the entire spiritual worldview of Unangan people in that tiny little thing. It has a spiral, and that spiral is symbolic of the of Aro, which is the maker of our center self, our way of being, and in the middle of the volute is a phallic symbol, and the volute itself is shaped like a bird, which was a feminine symbol to our people. And we had a moon calendar that we lived by. We were egalitarian in the way that we made decisions, except that the women were the ones that initiated the shamans, not the men. And we are fulfilling part of a prophecy that says there will come a time when the world will need the indigenous ways. And this time is now.
And you know, so many different tribes have that same prophecy. Isn't that amazing?
Yep, and it's no accident.
Yeah, I'm with you there. If you could only bring about one change to improve our environmental situation, Larry, what would it be?
It would be my hope and prayer that people go to the heart, because the heart never lies. It never deceives us, unlike the mind. And that if we go to the heart, the answers will be provided. It is the transformer from the spiritual to the physical. And we need both. We need the spiritual and physical. One elder here said, we need two wings to fly, one for physical and one for spiritual. And without either one, we can't fly.
Boy, that's beautifully stated. And it's so interesting that the heart sits right in the middle of the body, you know, in the middle of the chest. And it's like if all energy can unite there or come through there, we're bringing balance in the world. And if it doesn't, we aren't. Is that the way you're seeing this?
Yes, that's exactly true, and that's the way that many indigenous spiritual leaders around the world feel.
So that's such a simple solution if we could just do it. But to do it, we have to what? Face our fear, yes?
Yes, and be present in the moment. Someone once said, God can only be found in the silence between one's thoughts. And Deepak Chopra said, the point of power is in the present moment. There is no other time. But we've gone into the past from guilt, shame, remorse, anger, rage, jealousy, all these things that we carry to the present, or we project into the future out of fear, every place except now. And what we have to do is get present.
That is so, so true. There's a formula of causality. I wish I could remember the formula and the gentleman that did it, but it basically proves mathematically that manifestation is equal parts past and future, but can only happen in the moment. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're outlining there.
That's true.
Before we run out of time, Larry, where can people find your book?
In any bookstore and on Amazon. You can find, if it's not in the bookstore, just ask for it and they'll get it for you. But it's the wisdom of the elders through the lens of my life.
So how do you see the current environmental issues affecting your people at home and their way of life? Are they still going on as usual, or is there quite an impact?
No, Alaska is, because it's in the north, is more affected now than other places, except for some of the islands in the better climates. But every single species is declining. The migration routes of animals are changing. The ground and the vegetation on the ground is changing. All of it is creating a real test to whether or not we're going to survive. In fact, the elders told me you should consider stopping concentrating on saving the Bering Sea and focus on showing our people what they must do to survive.
So instead of creating solutions, we're looking at just trying to create survival at this point?
Survival and adaptation. That's what most of the that's why they call it a climate crisis. When we met with the Indigenous Knowledge Sessions at the Global Summit of Climate Change, they concluded that governments will not act fast enough, and that we have climate crisis, not climate change, and that we must depend on ourselves to determine what we must do.
And the sad part is, most people don't know how to depend on themselves for anything.
Well, that's because we've been schooled and indoctrinated in giving away our personal authority, and that once we stop that, I don't mean, recklessly ignore laws and things like that, but understand that comes from masculine imbalance, and that something new is going to be created, but we don't know what that is. We still have the old with us, and we are yet to form the new. We're at the nexus point of those two, and we are the leaders, all of us.
We are the leaders, Larry. We are the leaders. We're out of time.
Gurus.
We're out of time, and I can't thank you enough for all your wisdom and being on this show. Our guest this hour has been ILARION MERCULIEFF. He's the author of Wisdom Keeper, One Man's Journey to Honor the Untold History of the Unangan People. You are listening to The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, as you live from the heart.